Caleb had been riding since sunrise, and the sun was already burning the sky a deep orange when he slowed his horse near an old, dried-up well. He wiped sweat from his face and drank the last sip from his canteen. The desert land around him stretched wide and silent. No wind, no birds, only the endless dry air. But then, far in the distance, he noticed something that did not belong in all that emptiness. A thin trail of smoke rising from what looked like a small, damaged hut. He squinted and studied it carefully. The roof looked half-broken, and the place seemed abandoned from a distance. But the smoke meant someone was there. Still, no movement around it. No horses, no tools, nothing. Caleb felt a strange pull in his chest. He had been traveling alone for weeks and had no reason to turn toward that lonely place. But something about it felt wrong. He trusted his instincts more than anything. So he mounted his horse again and rode toward the hut. As he got closer, the silence grew heavier. The front door hung crooked. The tiny windows were covered with cloth pieces. Caleb dismounted quietly. His boots crushed the dry ground, but no one came out. He stepped near the door and knocked lightly. At first, nothing happened. Then he heard a faint, scared whisper. From inside, children whispering. Before he could call out, the door opened slightly. A young Apache woman stood there, holding a cracked bowl in her hands. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, and her cheeks were sunburned. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She did not trust easily, he could see that instantly. Caleb lifted his hat a little in greeting. She did not move. Behind her he saw 3 small children, peeking from behind her legs. They looked thin, dusty, and frightened. One of them hid his face behind her skirt. The woman stepped slightly forward, as if she was trying to shield them. Caleb spoke gently. "Ma'am, I saw smoke. Thought someone might need help." "Ma." She didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a tight line. She seemed unsure whether he was danger or safety. Caleb noticed the broken cooking pot on the floor, the weak fire barely warming the room, the empty water bucket. The place felt like survival, hanging by a thread. After a long silence, she finally said, "We are fine." But her voice held no strength. It sounded like someone who had used that same sentence too many times, even when it wasn't true. Caleb looked again at the children. Their clothes were worn, and their eyes looked hungry. He stepped back a little, to show he meant no harm. "I don't mean trouble," he said. "Just passing by." She opened the door a little wider, not in welcome, but in tired honesty. Caleb could now see more clearly. There was no food, no supplies, no tools. Only the woman trying to hold everything together with her bare hands. The smallest child tugged at her dress and whispered, "Auntie, I'm hungry." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. She was trying very hard not to show her pain, but her exhaustion was clear. She finally spoke again, voice low. "They are not mine. They are my sister's children. She passed away. There is no one else left." Caleb nodded quietly. He understood loss, and he understood loneliness. "And you've been raising them alone?" he asked softly. She nodded once. Caleb looked at the broken bucket and asked, "Where do you get your water?" She hesitated before saying, "The well, but it is far. Too heavy for the children to walk. Too heavy for me to carry more than once." Caleb did not ask for more details. He simply turned and walked to his horse. She tensed up, thinking he was leaving. But he grabbed his empty canteen and an extra bucket tied to the saddle. Without asking permission, he walked toward the old well. Noya, he would only learn her name later, watched him silently as he went. She did not move from the doorway. The children followed him with their eyes, unsure what to think. Caleb filled the bucket with cold water and carried it back to the hut. His arms ached from the weight, but he didn't show it. He set the bucket down inside the hut gently. The woman stood still, unsure what to say. Caleb only asked, "When was the last time you ate, ma'am?" She did not answer. Her eyes dropped to the floor. The silence said everything. Caleb reached into his saddlebag and brought out what little food he had left: dried corn, a bit of bread, a few pieces of jerky. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The children's eyes widened when they saw it. The woman whispered, "They should eat first." Caleb nodded. Of course. But when she started giving the food to the children, Caleb noticed she wasn't taking anything for herself. She pretended she wasn't hungry, but her hands trembled from weakness. He didn't say anything, but he saw it. Then he looked outside, at the empty land, and made a quick choice. "This place isn't safe," he said quietly. "The roof could fall. There's no heat. Let me take you somewhere better." The woman stiffened. "We do not know you." Caleb nodded again. "True, but you and the little ones need a roof and warm food." She hesitated. She didn't want to depend on anyone. She didn't want to trust the wrong person. But the children were cold, tired, and scared. She looked at them, then at the hut, then at Caleb. Still unsure, she whispered, "Why would you help us?" Caleb looked at her with calm honesty. "Because no one else did." She didn't speak after that. She just looked at the children again. And that was enough. Caleb picked up the water bucket and walked toward the cabin. The children slowly followed, staying close to their aunt. The woman walked last, watching everything, making sure the man did not lead them into danger. The cabin was small but solid. Caleb pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust rose from the floor, and the windows were dull with age. But it was safer than the broken hut. Caleb started cleaning immediately. He fixed the loose window shutter with a piece of rope. He swept the floor with an old broom he found outside. He set stones around the stove and lit a stronger fire. The room slowly warmed up. The children watched him, amazed at how calmly he worked. The woman stood near the door, arms crossed but eyes softening. She was still nervous, still unsure, but something inside her was beginning to trust him. Caleb cooked a small pot of warm food with the supplies he had brought. The smell filled the cabin, and the children's stomachs growled loudly. Caleb smiled slightly. When the food was ready, he handed the first bowl, not to the children, but to the woman. She froze, not believing it. "The children," she began. "They will eat too," Caleb said gently, "but you need strength to take care of them." She hesitated, then slowly accepted the bowl. The children ate next, with relieved smiles that warmed Caleb's heart. As the fire grew brighter, the cabin began to feel like a real home instead of an abandoned shelter. The children curled near the stove, whispering and laughing quietly for the first time in days. The woman sat on the floor, holding her bowl with both hands, watching the children with tired but hopeful eyes. Caleb sat near the door, keeping watch. He didn't speak much, didn't ask for thanks. He just stayed close enough to make sure they felt safe. Outside, the wind finally picked up and brushed the land softly. Inside, warmth spread through the small cabin. For the first time in months, the woman breathed without fear, and the children slept without worry. Caleb didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Neither did she. But for tonight, they were safe. And that was enough. The sun rose early the next morning, sending orange light through the dusty windows of the old cabin. Caleb had stepped outside before dawn, letting the woman and the children sleep a little longer. He gathered dry wood, checked the area, and made sure no tracks surrounded the cabin during the night. Out here, danger did not always announce itself. Sometimes it crept quietly. Caleb knew that well. When he returned, he found the woman awake, standing at the doorway with careful eyes. She held her niece in her arms, while the other two children stood behind her legs. She seemed calmer than yesterday, but still alert, like someone who had learned never to relax fully. Caleb smiled a little. Morning. She nodded. Morning. He started a small fire and warmed some water so the children could wash their faces. They laughed when the warm steam hit their cold cheeks. The woman watched them, and a little of her fear faded. The cabin felt safe for now. Caleb stepped out again to gather food. He planned to hunt a rabbit or maybe a bird if he could find one. But as he walked toward the ridge, he noticed something that made him stop. Dust. A cloud of dust rising far in the distance, where the land dipped and the path curved. That much dust meant horses. Several. His jaw tightened. He knew riders when he saw them. He returned to the cabin calmly so he wouldn't alarm the children. When he reached the door, the woman noticed his stern expression immediately. She stepped aside slightly, so the children wouldn't hear. Someone's coming, Caleb said quietly. Her face turned pale. Who? Don't know yet, he replied. But they are riding fast. She swallowed hard and whispered, We should go. Caleb shook his head. Running will only make it worse. Stay inside with the children. I'll handle it. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She didn't know why she trusted him, but she did. Minutes later, the riders arrived. 3 men, loud, careless, and too sure of themselves. They pulled their horses close to the cabin, sending dust flying. Caleb stepped out onto the small porch, calm but ready. The woman peeked from inside but stayed out of sight. One of the men pointed at Caleb. That woman is on land that ain't hers, he shouted. She has to leave. Caleb didn't raise his voice. This cabin isn't yours either. The men exchanged annoyed looks. The leader leaned forward on his saddle. You're protecting her. Why? Caleb didn't blink. Because she needs help. And because you're talking too loudly for men who don't own this land. The men laughed, but it didn't reach their eyes. They tried to push forward, but Caleb took one step closer, blocking the doorway. He didn't reach for his gun, didn't threaten them. He simply stood firm, his presence calm but solid like a stone wall. The leader's smile faded. He watched Caleb for a moment, trying to read him. Finally, he spat into the dirt and pulled the reins. Fine. But we'll be back. They rode off, leaving a trail of dust behind. When Caleb returned inside, the woman held her breath. She had heard every word. They will cause trouble, she whispered. Not today, Caleb replied. She looked down at the children. They were frightened again, their small bodies shaking. Caleb knelt to meet their eyes. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said, calm and steady. Something in his voice made the children believe him instantly. For the next few days, life slowly began to settle. Caleb hunted in the mornings and brought back food. He fixed the broken stovepipe, built a small fence around the cabin, and repaired the old roof to keep the cold wind out. Every evening, the children followed him around, asking questions and laughing at his stories. He showed them how to gather dry twigs and how to tell which plants were safe. The cabin, once quiet and empty, now carried the voices of 3 little ones, bouncing around like cheerful echoes. The woman, Noya, as Caleb finally learned when she told him her name, began to trust him more. She watched how gently he spoke to the children, how he never took anything for himself first, how he always made sure they had enough to eat. She saw how he carried heavy wood without complaint, how he fixed things without being asked, how he stood between her family and danger without wanting anything in return. One evening, while the children slept against each other near the warm stove, Noya stepped outside. The sky was filled with stars, shining so bright they looked almost close enough to touch. Caleb was sitting on a log nearby, sharpening a small knife. She approached quietly. You could have left us, she said softly. You could have passed by, like many did before. Caleb paused. I didn't want to, he said simply. Noya sat down a little distance away. She held her hands together, twisting her fingers nervously. I was becoming tired, she admitted. I had no more strength left. I could not find food. I was scared for the children every hour. Caleb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You kept them alive. That takes more strength than anything I've done." She looked at him with surprise. No one had ever said that to her. The next day, trouble returned. The same 3 men rode back, angry and determined. But this time, things were different. They found a cabin with a fixed fence, a strong fire burning inside, and Caleb standing ready before they even spoke. They also found Noya standing beside him, not hiding, not trembling, but steady and unafraid. The leader tried to push forward again, but Caleb didn't move. "Go," he said plainly. "There's nothing for you here." The men hesitated. Something in Caleb's stance, in the quiet strength of the cabin behind him, made them decide it wasn't worth it. They turned their horses and rode away. This time, they did not say they would come back. That evening, the cabin felt different, safer, warmer, like a storm had passed. Noya cooked a small meal using the ingredients Caleb had brought. It was simple vegetables, a little meat, warm bread, but when she placed a woven cloth on the table, carefully smoothing it out, Caleb realized something. That cloth had meaning. It wasn't just a decoration. It was her way of showing gratitude, her way of saying the cabin was no longer just his place. It was theirs. The children ran in circles, happy and full of energy. Noya smiled softly, watching them. Caleb sat at the table, feeling something he had not felt in years, a sense of belonging. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Noya whispered, "Thank you." It was a simple word, but it carried every fear she had held, every struggle she survived, every hope she was beginning to feel again. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome." But inside, he knew the truth. Helping them had changed him too. He had been wandering for so long, searching for a place that felt right. Now, in this small cabin, with a woman who had survived unimaginable hardships and 3 children who laughed like tiny sparks of light, he felt something new, something he didn't expect. He felt home. The night was quiet, the fire warm, and for the first time in a long time, all 5 of them slept peacefully under one roof. Not as strangers, but as something closer to a family forming slowly, gently, like dawn rising over quiet land.